The Shadow Chancellor Jeremy Hunt has said working families will never forgive Rachel Reeves for her budget this October. He says it will be the biggest betrayal in history.
The new Chancellor blames the previous government for making unfunded commitments whilst knowing that the money wasn't there. Jeremy Hunt joins us live on the programme this morning. A very good morning to you. Of course, it was a clash.
Morning, Ranveer.
Good morning. It was a clash in the Commons. Rachel Reeves was angry with you. You hit back. But, of course, the Institute for Fiscal Studies, which is independent and trusted, Rishi Sunak has proclaimed how trusted this think tank is, have described the details of what you did in power as shocking, and that Rachel Reeves has a right to be cross. Why is it that you were not clear about the black hole that you were leaving behind and yet signed off £20 billion worth of national insurance cuts that you must have known we couldn't afford?
What the Institute for Fiscal Studies actually said today is that it should not all of what she heard announced yesterday should have been a surprise. But the element that surprised them the most, which is, I think, what is worth discussing, is the Asylum Bill. Now, we had a very good plan to deal with the spiralling costs of asylum. The Home Office told us, and this was in the public domain, that it would cost potentially £11 billion a year by the end of 2026. And that was why we had the Rwanda plan. Now, it was a political choice by the Labour government to cancel the Rwanda scheme, and they cancelled it at exactly the moment it was most expensive to do so, when we paid all the upfront costs, all the costs to Rwanda, hadn't got any of the flights going off to Rwanda. It would not have cost those numbers, anything like those numbers, if the Conservatives had been in office, because we would have not, most of those costs are the cost of housing asylum seekers. We wouldn't have had those costs because a number of them would have been in Rwanda. But most importantly, we would have deterred people from coming here in the first place. And this is the real problem with what Rachel Reeves said yesterday.
Can I just interject just briefly?
Yeah, I want to make my point. I'll make my point, Ranveer, if I may. The real problem is that it's fine to disagree with Conservative policies, but what you can't do is then blame them for the black hole that your decisions have created. And on asylum, on welfare reform, which wasn't in the King's speech, on public sector pay, those are decisions that she has taken.
They have said specifically, Jeremy Hunt's £1 billion cut, several £1 billion cut to national insurance looks ever less defensible. They are specifically saying that. And are you saying that that is rubbish and that...
Yeah, well, I do disagree with that, because that national insurance cut, according to the independent OBR, is going to bring 200,000 more people into work. It's going to fill about a quarter of the vacancies in the economy, and that helps growth. And this is all about growth. Now, Labour pays lip service to growth, but they are about to raise taxes in a way that will damage growth.
But if overspending was clear to you...
There is a fundamental contradiction in what we have.
But if your overspending was absolutely clear to you, why wasn't that made clear to the public in spring?
But we weren't overspending. And I'm a Chancellor who delivered 4 fiscal events, 2 budgets and 2 autumn statements. All of them, we met our fiscal rules. I would have been able to continue to do that if I'd been re-elected and carried on as Chancellor this autumn and for the budgets that followed, because we had a good plan to do that. Well, let me give you another example. Our plan was based on public sector productivity. I spent a good chunk of the budget in March talking about that. What Rachel Reeves chose to do yesterday was to give inflation-busting pay awards, nearly 3 times inflation for most public sector workers, 10 times inflation for junior doctors, without asking for any productivity improvements in return, which would have reduced that £9 billion cost. Now, she's Chancellor. We lost the election. We accept that. But she's made that choice, and she has to accept the consequence, not try and blame it on her predecessor.
Come on, Mr. Hunt. I've been watching Treasury Matters for many years, and I have to say I've not seen anything quite like this before. You, as Chancellor, and the Treasury, for this financial year, the year we are in, had made a whole series of spending commitments agreed with the Transport Department for £2.9 billion, the Defence Department for £1.7 billion, the Home Office for asylum costs of £6.4 billion, which had not been made public, and for which there was not provision in the reserve. I mean, the truth is, the Treasury should have asked you to give them a direction to agree these things because the money wasn't there. And to come on the programme and start blaming what Labour might do in the future for costs you signed up to in this financial year, I mean, it doesn't cut any ice at all.
Ed, I'll tell you what doesn't cut any ice, and that is a Labour Chancellor standing up in one breath saying there's a £22 billion black hole, and then at the same time giving junior doctors a 22% pay rise. I think everyone can see the nonsense that is. But I think you just answered your own question. If we had public finances that were not sustainable, as you know, the reserve, £14 billion at the start of this year for revenue, £4 billion for capital. If the reserve had not been adequate, then I would have been asked for a direction by the Permanent Secretary. I wasn't, because we had a good plan to deal with those pressures. Labour has chosen to tear up that plan. They cannot then, if they want to give these huge pay rises to the unions that backed them in the election without asking for anything in return, that is a political choice. What they can't then do is say it's all the Conservatives' fault, because it isn't. They made that choice.
If you take the one number, £6.5 billion, £6.5 billion in this year to spend on asylum hotel costs, that was a decision that you had agreed with the Home Office in this year, which you hadn't made public to Parliament. That's correct, isn't it?
It is not correct. No, it would not have cost that money if Conservatives had been in office, because we would have had flights going to Rwanda. Nearly all that cost is the cost of housing
you didn't have any flights going to
migrants.
Rwanda. You didn't have a single flight.
Yes, I know, and they were about to go to Rwanda. And had they gone to Rwanda,
but I'm asking you a factual.
Hang on,
I'm asking you a factual. I'm asking you a factual
question. Not only would there have been fewer people
question.
to house, I'm giving you a factual answer, and you're not letting me give the answer. I'll give it to you now.
£6.4 billion
if those
with the Home
flights
Office
had gone to
for this
Rwanda,
year,
there would have been fewer people to house, and the bill would have been less than that £6.5 billion. But actually, it would have been much less than that £6.5 billion, because having those flights going to Rwanda would have meant that we would have had fewer people claiming asylum arriving here illegally, and that would have reduced the cost. So we had a good plan in place. Labour scrapped that plan. They need to own their own decisions.
I have to say, look, I thought when you came in as Chancellor to clear up the mess that you inherited, you made a series of important decisions to stabilise things. And I've, on this programme, often said you made the right calls. I don't think the Treasury or a Chancellor would normally sign up to the kind of things it appears you did sign up to for this financial year. The only conclusion I drew is you must have been instructed by Number 10, by Downing Street, by the Prime Minister, to do these things, because otherwise, for you to have signed up to this list of spending commitments in year, blowing your own reserve and not making them public to Parliament, I mean, it's unprecedented, Mr. Hunt. I mean, surely somebody else told you to do this.
I understand you're kind of using the same mock outrage that we had from Rachel Reeves yesterday. I did actually answer your question, but let me tell it to you again, because you were speaking over me, if I may say it, with the greatest
respect. I was trying to get you to answer the question.
It would not have cost that money. Yeah, you know, well, I was answering it, but you wouldn't let me. It would not have cost that money if the Conservatives had won the election, because we would have had flights to Rwanda, which would have been fewer people to house. We would have had a deterrent impact from those flights happening, which would have mean fewer people needing to be housed in the first place. That was a policy. Now, I understand that lots of people disagree with that policy. That is not an answer to my question. I ask you a very specific... But it is a policy that would have reduced costs, and if Labour make a decision that they want to cancel that Rwanda scheme, then they have to bear the consequence. And I gave you a very specific answer. It would not have cost that sum of money.
But the thing which always frustrates our audiences is when people give specific answers which don't answer the question. I asked you a specific question.
But
did you, as Chancellor...
I gave you a very
I'll ask it again, because I think, because I think you're the kind of person who likes to give straight answers. Did you agree in this year with the Home Office £6.4 billion this year for asylum costs? I mean, did you?
No, because we didn't. I'm just giving you a very straight answer, because we did not believe it would cost that amount of money. I've told you about 6 times, Ed. If you
did agree with the
first time, you wouldn't have had to ask it 6 times. No, I told you we didn't agree it because we didn't believe it would cost that money, because we would have had flights going to Rwanda. And this is the point, Ed. You know, Labour made some choices when they came to office. So another choice they made was to give inflation-busting pay awards, £9 billion pay award to the unions that supported them in the election without asking for anything in return. A year ago, we also had inflation-busting pay awards recommended by the pay review bodies, but we didn't just pay up. We said, well, we need some productivity agreement in return. We had a very difficult summer, but we secured those agreements. We reduced the cost to the public purse, and the result of doing that is that we got a better deal for taxpayers. Now, Rachel Reeves has chosen not to do that. She said we're going to honour these without asking for anything in return. The unions are very, very happy this morning. That is a choice she has made, and politics is about making difficult choices and owning them. And when I made the difficult decisions that you're talking about, I didn't blame other governments. I said, look, these is where we're at. We've had a pandemic, we've had Ukraine, and I'm going to make these difficult decisions. They're the right thing to do, and that's what Rachel Reeves needs to do. And I think what will make people angry, I'll just say this there, what will make people really angry is that she knew in advance that she was going to cancel the Rwanda scheme. She knew in advance that she wouldn't want to do welfare reform, which is why it isn't in the King's speech. She knew she wouldn't want to ask the unions for productivity improvements.
Okay.
But she didn't make any provision for the costs of making those choices.
Thank you. And in a name, have you chosen who to back for the leadership of the party?
I have been involved in too many leadership campaigns. I'm stepping aside for this one, and I'm not going to be publicly supporting anyone. But thank you for asking, Ranveer.
Okay. Thank you. Jeremy Hunt, former Chancellor, thank you very much for joining us on the show. We will, of course, be putting some of those points to the current Chancellor, Rachel Reeves, who will be on this show too, to explain, I suppose, how she will speak to pensioners as she goes out and about and has to face up to the fact that she is taking money away, the winter fuel payment, from millions of pensioners to balance the books.